The topic, right, revisiting the working capital and cash flow management. It is quite common word, but why the word revisit today is important, right? So we have the panel here, and to introduce myself, I'm 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗶𝗁. I head the finance for InfoVision, an IT services company. Okay. I will hand over Srini, if you want to.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Srinivas. I am the CFO of 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗶𝗁. We're a solar rooftop solutions company. We manufacture solar panels and we do installation for our customers and mainly in the MSME sector.
Hi all. I'm Sharat Sodhani, CFO for 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗶𝗁. This company is into health tech, tele-ICU and software product service for healthcare industry. Prior to that, I have worked in multiple MNCs as well as startups as finance side.
Hi, this is Samadrita Chakravarti. I'm a group CFO of 𝗥𝗲𝗵 𝗙𝗶𝗁. Basically, 𝗥𝗲𝗵 is it's a natural fiber supply chain, B2B. We have a entire supply chain from farm to fashion. I joined this company 4 months back, but prior to that, I was in KPMG, and before that, I was with PwC. And that's all about me. Thank you.
Hey, hi, this is Srikant from 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗶𝗶𝗹. I'm Director of Finance here. I'm pretty sure that being in Bangalore, we would have brewed a hot cup of coffee for each one of you at some time or the other. So I think no other further introduction here.
So like this topic is quite vast, right? But in the interest of the time, we'll be focusing on key aspects. One, how the planning, forecasting, the business model, right? How it is key for the working capital management. So to start with, say Srikant, if you'd like to take up how, especially being in consumer industry, right? How you manage your inventory in the working capital, right? If you'd like to throw some light on that.
I'm not sure where to start. I think this is one of the most difficult part at least in our industry. Number of SKUs which we deal with and the entire back-end planning which we have to do. It takes a lot of energy, and I think this is one aspect where I miss my banking days, where I know that the supply is only money. I need to just find person who want to borrow. That's it. Here, with almost around 90 SKUs and around 98 stores which we have spread across 7 cities, you have to plan for every single thing, and you have to also take care of what may go wrong, what may not go wrong. And doing this all earlier, if I go back in my earlier career days, where you have to just look into and evaluate every single thing on the Excel itself, and you have to think through that where that variations can come from. It used to take a lot of energy if we had been in the same place. Fortunately, with the advancement of technologies and the data set which we carry, I'll say it has been a simpler job still, from the technical standpoint, you still have to evaluate things. For me, for instance, last September when the rain gods were pretty happy on Bangalore, and entire shops were shut for a week. So it's not only the revenue which you lose out, the entire back-end chain planning has to be taken into account. We deal in freshly baked products which we serve at our cafes, and all of these have perishable lives. So entire taking care of that at that point of time, that okay, where you can utilize that, so that you have to be nimble on the feet as well. So while you have to plan and strategize for that, how the business will work ahead, what cost aspects on a longer terms which you look, but at the same time, granular level work also needs to be done through. So that's the challenging part. And here I'll see, as the last panelist, we're also speaking on the data and AI. These helps to a lot of extent, but yet the manual effort is still required.
Sarah, do you want to add anything?
Sure. See, technology is indispensable now in the business, and no business can scale without the use of technology. When it comes to working capital management, your forecasting model, your prediction model becomes very, very important. And if you are dealing with large number of SKUs, large number of customers, or your business is not something which is based on contract, where everything can be planned, the use of technology become more crucial. In my previous role as CFO of 𝗥𝗲𝗃𝗶𝗃, right, we used to have a lot of peak demand seasons, off demand seasons and all, right? Now, during the peak demand season, your demand would be 3x of your off seasons, right? And we used to have thousands of SKUs. If you don't predict accurately or closer to the accuracy that what you need, you run a risk of not producing enough and losing out on the sale to the customers, to the competition market share. If you overestimate, incorrectly estimate, you have another problem of inventory lying in your warehouse without any use and a blockage of your working capital. Just one example. Currently, I am into a healthcare sector. Now, where we are providing services to the partner hospitals. Now, daily, how many patients will come or not, it depends upon so many things. It's not just like you can predict exactly how the environment is. There are certain pandemics happening or certain change in the weather which start creating more problematic things. Things like, interesting fact, if you see the planned surgeries, during April month, planned surgeries are less. And the logic is a lot of people are on the leave, including the doctors, right? How do you build all those interesting things into your prediction model to make sure that the demand and supply is met and you are at the right working capital cycles?
Anything on the real-time reporting? How critical, Srinivas, if you want to? Yeah, is it okay? Is it okay? Sorry. We all understand, right? For any decisions, real-time reporting is quite critical.
So I represent a manufacturing company, so we are more old school of thought, more traditional. So for us, and that too we are in the EPC business. So for us, real-time reporting is really not that much. For us, what is really important on real-time reporting is how quickly are the customers paying us, because we are more into the EPC business.
Yeah.
I think we should have probably asked the other panelists on the real-time reporting. I wouldn't be the right person to answer that.
I would actually like to add on upon my previous example that in a service business, when you have patients coming, in the real time, if you don't know, you may have a situation where doctors are not available to support. It's a matter of life and death. Now, what can be more important now? You can imagine how important it is to have a real-time view and reporting on everything what is going into your operations. If I have to go back to my previous experience of, let's say, I was finance head for Rapido, which is a bike taxi company, right? There were millions of, today Rapido is doing almost, if I'm not wrong, 1 million ride a day, right? 1 million ride a day means there would be thousands of drivers who are doing this driving job and then millions of customers, right? Matching that demand and supply on a real time, right? You can imagine how important it is. If you look into any D2C company, large companies like 𝗥𝗏𝗃 or Mamaearth or any, they are serving lakhs of orders a month, right? Now the problem of some customers placing an order, cancellation, if you don't have that real-time reporting, you will incur huge losses. If a customer has cancelled the order and you know it is in your factory, it's better to stop it right now from the dispatch. If you don't have a real-time reporting, you will dispatch the material and incur the freight cost, right? Even if it is halfway and not crossed a certain docking point, you have an option of calling it back. So real-time reporting can help in a lot of cost optimization, taking the corrective course of action. Like my friend was saying one example of rain, right? If you can predict that, okay, next 1 week my door is going to be closed for the customers, better not to produce and keep it perishable item. So, anything you would like to add?
Being from a startup, real-time reporting is also very important for your cash flows management as well. Because here you are, all the payments, all the receipts which you look, the oversight which you have in terms of that, what was your sales happening, and because right now our banking system has evolved over the last 10-15 years a lot. I remember the days where everything was through check payments, and now thanks to this government, I hardly make any check payment. My 99.99% payments are through internet and things. So I know what my payment cycles will be, which day I need to make the payment, and that day I need the funds itself. I don't need to plan 2 or 3 days in advance that, okay, I need to issue a check and then it will go to the counter. I don't know when it will hit the bank account. Unfortunately, that the only 4 checks which I've issued in last quarter were to the government payments. So I think hope they'll also build somehow in to accept these e-commerce payments.
Yeah, I get it. But if I pick up the thread, right, if you have to achieve the real-time reporting, no doubt it got picked up in the previous session, how technology plays an important role, right? And is it beyond the finance? You have to feed the data, whether working capital is not just limited to the finance team, right? You have to work with the entire supply chain team and your vendor management team. So any thread you want to pick up from there?
See, I would like to add that, see, finance in the reporting function is someone who is recipient of data from everybody.
Exactly.
3 key component of your working capital, your AR, your AP, and your inventory, right? Inventory you don't produce, you don't buy. Someone else is buying. AP, you have a procurement team. AR, you have a sales team. So for the real-time reporting, you need to have integrated systems and processes or ERPs in place, right? You use ERPs or built in-house system, but the key is, are they integrated with each other or not? Is there a central database where all the intelligence and data is getting collected and available on a real-time basis or not? One of the common problem I have seen across a lot of companies is that they have data available, but it is broken. It is stored in different system. A procurement team may have its own data. Purchase team, sales team is having its own set of data. Everybody is reporting separate set of number. And as a finance, you are guessing on the numbers. I think everywhere, wherever I go, the first focus is that make sure your data is integrated and available at one place for real-time reporting. And it's not achievable if everybody is not part of the mission of that.
Samantha, you want to add anything?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Real-time reporting, you see, it's very important for in a startup company, not for startup, for any other company, which deals with cash, credit, sales, and all. It's very important because, again, one more thing is your real-time reporting should be automated also. Because if it is done manually, then it doesn't help. It should be in a platform which everybody can access and see all together at one place, And the source of data should be also, one source of data should be used so that everybody gets the same data together. So that's very important for decision making. And sometimes it happens that you get the report at the end of the month, which doesn't work. You have to get the report immediately, within a few hours, within a day, to take a fast decision. So it's very important. I mean, the importance cannot be described in one sentence or in 2 lines. It's quite very important to make a quick decision and run the business in the right way. Thank you.
I'd like to add here how we do it in manufacturing. I'm sure there are colleagues from the manufacturing side here. So our approach is a little more, I would say, old-fashioned. For us, how do you make sure that, in the solar industry, just to give you all some idea, 90% of all the components that go into a solar panel are imported. So there's 10% value addition and there's some local purchases that happens. You have to pay all your suppliers in advance. 85% of all the solar equipment comes from only one country, and we know who that is. So they don't take any letters of credit. It's all about paying in advance, and then you have to recover the money from your customers after 3 to 4 months. So how do you make sure that you're getting information correctly? How do you make sure that you're producing correctly? How do you make sure that you're producing as per plan? So at Orb, what we did is we did something very simple. We said everybody has to own the business plan. So if you have a sales target and we say we're going to sell so many megawatts, okay, that's the sales target. But then how do you make sure that supply chain, procurement, production is all aligned? Because you have to break up that entire sales at a monthly level. For that you have to plan when to procure. There are some items that are long lead, right? So some things like a glass that's on a solar panel takes 60 days to come. So you pay now, you get it after 60 days. You make the solar panel, you sell it. You'll get the money after 3 to 4 months, depending on what kind of business you're doing, right? So you can imagine the cycle. And in this period, you have to also make sure that your shop runs, you have to pay your rent, salaries, and everything, right? So we made sure that, first of all, everybody owns the plan, right? So procurement is aligned on when they need to order, what they need to order, and that helps a lot in making sure that you plan your cash as well. So that puts pressure on everybody, pressure in a different way, in a positive way, so that the sales guys know that, okay, I've sold, my job doesn't end there. I have to also make sure that I collect the money. And for that, we also had to modify some of our payment terms. How do we collect money? Some of it is in advance, some of it is on dispatch of material. So that helps. As far as real time is concerned, for us, the thing that we really look at real time is how the commodity prices are moving and when is it that we need to order. And for that, we've invested in some external data sources, which are specific to the solar industry, which helps us to monitor how the cell prices move. So for us, that's the real-time data. But then, like I said, our approach is a little more old-fashioned and traditional. And what we've done a little differently is we made sure that everybody owns either the production targets and the sales targets other than those people. Like sales, apart from sales, everybody else knows what the sales targets are. That's helped. That integrated approach is very, very important, at least in our industry.
Just want to add one thing here. While we are talking about the integrated approach, it's really important that any updates are also, well disbursed among the various teams.
Absolutely.
In my previous organizations, I have seen the budget was maintained, mentioned that, okay, this is the target. Sales have reduced their target, seeing the market conditions. Supply chain is still working on the earlier one. So that's the chaos which can bring anything down. So whatever we are targeting, everyone has to be well aligned, and whatever changes are there, it's very important to have all the stakeholders involved and then take it forward.
So, Srinivas, if I pick up the thread, right, like you mentioned, you import a raw material, but your cells, most of the cells in India are where the collection cycle is too long. One, when your internal stakeholders, like you rightly said, first you have to set your internal systems right. But when that fails, right, you end up in a situation where I don't know to go further. So, whom you approach? Definitely bankers or the financial institutions. How actually you plan around this?
Sure. So I think for us in finance, what is our biggest nightmare? Our biggest nightmare is that when we don't get collections on time. And then you will have certain dates approach, right? On the 30th, you have to pay salaries. On the 7th, you have to pay TDS. On the 20th, you have to pay GST, PF, ESI, etc. Right? So what is it that you need to do to make sure that the lights are on, your shop is running, right? So I think that's where, in terms of priority, I've made it very clear to everyone that, look, there are certain red lines we just cannot cross, whether you like it or not. Right? So whether it's the founders of the company or the heads of supply chain or whoever, I've told them very clearly, these are red lines you just cannot cross. As an organization, if there are misses on these dates, we're finished, right? So whether you like it or not, I will go up, I will collect the cash and make sure that those payments are made, right? We also have quarterly payments on debt. So I said, those have to happen. Now, if you come and say, oh, this supplier has to be paid, sorry, tough luck. It's not going to work, right? So those are the red lines that I've drawn and made sure that there is certain amount of discipline that comes in, right? So as soon as the month end comes, or let's say the 5th or 6th is approaching, everybody's like, okay, the collections don't come in, we know what our CEO is going to say, right? So communicating and sending that message across is very, very important. Like I said, it's all about how everybody understands also the other team's problems. Otherwise, what happens typically is that being in finance and the nature of our job, we end up being the bad guys all the time, right? But if you tell the other people, look, there are certain concerns, which is not my problem, but it's a problem of the organization. Then there is a better appreciation, right? You may still have your tussles and you may still have that, but if there are these red lines that are taken care of, then your life becomes a little easy, right? So that's where, at least I've done that at Orb and made sure that at an organization level, we don't have any of these slip-ups. It's very, very important, right? And then you also know that even the sales teams are aware. I mean, when we had an annual sales meet, I've actually gone and talked about, not about things like, what is it that finance does, but I said, look, as a sales organization, you are responsible for our salaries, right? Because unless you sell, we are not going to get paid. But your job doesn't end with just getting that sales order or getting the dispatch, right? It's much beyond that. You also have to go and collect the money. Yeah. It's okay to do all the finger pointing. There may be technical issues. We are an EPC company. There will be issues. But then understand that if there is a slip up, this is how your whole cash cycle gets affected. And an organization, we will struggle, right? So
Getting your stakeholder is important.
Stakeholder management is very important. And then what we've also tried to do is a little different. So at Orb, while we are an EPC company, we've also figured out that since we cater mostly to MSMEs, MSME credit is always a challenge. So we've said we'll step in as a bank, we'll install the system for you, but you pay us over a period of 3 to 4 years with an interest rate. So we function pretty much like a bank without the NBFC structure. So we have regular cash flows that come in, so that take care of some of the recurring payments that we have. So that's also helped in slightly better cash management.
So basically, we classify the entire payout cycle, vital, essential, and desirable, right? Anything, Sharad or Srikant or Sarda, you want to add?
One thing I would like to add from my last 7 years of startup experience is that few companies are profitable and self-sustained, so for them it's more about managing your collections, etc. But a lot of startups are not profitable and they are dependent upon the external funding to fund their losses, right? And I have been part of such startups. So I always make sure 2 things. One is that, of course, working capital has to be managed, but keep a contingency reserve with you, and this contingency reserve should be known to you and only a handful of people. Not everybody should be aware, because you don't know what will fall, what will break, but you can't afford to default on your statutory payments like TDS, etc., or your salary to the employees, right? That's one thing. Second thing, I always believe being part of startup is right liquidity and making sure your company is aptly capitalized is very important from a long-term perspective. So that's 2 cents of mine here.
Hello. Well, when it comes to startup or MSME, I think working capital is everything. It is like a lifeblood of the company, and it is a maker and breaker of the company. The only problem is that, what I feel is it's not being understood properly, misunderstood and mismanaged. So I'd like to say a couple of things here. That the first and foremost is when the company is in the formative stage or it's growing and it's young, not matured, it's really important that company has enough of cash to run its business and to meet its obligation. The first and foremost here is that, the company has to estimate the requirement of the working capital. It has to evaluate how much working capital is required for its growth and for meeting its requirements. So the estimation is important. So if you overestimate working capital or you underestimate, in both the situations very bad. And if you overestimate and start acquiring a lot of funds, you tend to burn out a lot of cash so quickly that you cannot even anticipate. So it's very important that the right amount of working capital is projected, and definitely the projection depends upon the business planning and forecasting. So this is one part to it, and anyway, I think I can answer your question, what you have.
Yeah, my extended question to that is, right, when your entire planning system has failed, or to a certain extent, you're not able to come out of that zone, right, whom you're going to approach? And
so you see, the first very important part is that, when you are planning for your working capital, the working capital strategy should get aligned with your organizational strategy, always. So the working capital requirement is basically based on your business planning and forecasting and projections. Now, if the assumptions are not realistic, when you plan and forecast, your assumption has to be realistic. And if your assumptions are unrealistic and it is not based on the market trend, industry practice, your demand and supply, your customer behaviors and all those, you tend to, over-project your sales numbers. Now, I'm not saying that company over-project their sales number because of wrong assumptions, but it may be because of some pressure from the outsiders, maybe the investors want that you grow at such leaps and bounds, and so that the valuation goes up and they can get some return quickly. So it becomes very important, and then your business projections, if gets distorted, then what happens, that if a sales target is quite high, the company tends to burn out a lot of money in establishing that setup. If you have to, if your target is so much, and if you have to reach that target, you have to have your setup ready. Means you have to have a lot of headcounts, salespeople, to achieve that target. You have to have your operation set up. And then, if for some reason you cannot achieve, then you tend to lose out a lot of money. That burnout happens. And that results in a lot of blockage and choking in the system. That's the problem which happens. So it's very important that when you are estimating your working capital, it has to be absolutely realistic and absolutely to see that nothing is like, something where your choking doesn't happen. So debtors accumulation and all those things have to be very monitored very carefully so that liquidation is liquid fund is there and available all the time.
Yeah. The next topic, right? One is we do business, but what we cannot escape is the regulations and the taxation and all that, right? How much pressure those systems create on the working capital and how you really manage? Sarad, you want to pick up?
I guess this is my favorite topic. See, somehow in India, the taxations are not designed for efficiency. They are sometimes, I feel, designed more for the purpose of how you can squeeze out maximum from the SSCs. For example, our TDS system, right? For a loss-making companies like or startups, right? A lot of startups are in service sector, and we have our customers deducting TDS at 10%, right? Which means in a year, 10% of my revenue is stuck in the form of TDS. Imagine the impact on my working capital. It's like more than 1 month of my revenue is lying with the government, which I have to claim in the form of refunds, which I will get after 1.5 years, right? Similarly, GST, right? We are in healthcare, right? While my output is non-taxable, all my inputs are taxable, right? I can't take input credit, so it's a dead loss for me. Even if you are not in a situation where output is exempt, but let's say you are a loss-making startup, you keep accumulating your GST. There would be a lot of startups who have enough GST accumulated because of either capex or the losses in the operations, and you can't get the refund of that GST. You have to hope that one day you will get profitable and then that money will get unlocked. So these are the areas specific to our country, right? If you go to other countries like UAE and all, you can easily claim all these refunds. There are not such kind of 10% or 20% TDS getting holded by your customers on your payment.
Okay, I'd like to add to it. It's like GST. Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of blockage happens when you are, you have to pay, output tax on your, sales, and you don't avail you cannot claim the input tax. Now, what happens is, like in some of this ecosystem, like if the liquidity issues are suffered by the supplier also from where you're purchasing the goods, probably you are giving your output tax to the government, but it so happened that, the suppliers, not being able to pay GST because of some liquidity crisis that they are facing. And that tends to, that what happens if you're not getting the input tax. You have to do your compliance, right? But you cannot get the great benefit. And your cash burnout happens more than you pay out more cashes and you're not getting the input tax benefit. So that's something, it happens in a more or less in supply chain model, where like I'll just give you one instance, like, you give more credit in some of the industries, like textile industries, where what happens is to customers, you cannot do cash sales, right? Cash sales is not permittable. Permittable is not, you cannot do business if you do cash sales. So you have to give credit. So credit may be 60 or 90 days. But when you're purchasing goods from the supplier, the credit period is only 30 days, or maybe you have to purchase in cash, right? And there is a working capital gap which gets created in between. Now, what happens is, if, as I was mentioning about the previous, that with the debtors accumulation happens and you're not being able to realize, cash from the debtors and not being able to pay to the sundry creditors or the suppliers also, since you're not being able to pay, suppliers also say, I'm not going to pay GST on that. So it's like a vicious circle. If you're not being able to collect, you're not being able to pay your supplier. Supplier says, okay, fine, you have not paid me cash, I'll not pay your GST. But you have to do your compliance. So you have to pay GST to the government. So the money gets blocked. These are the crises which happens.
I guess in last 3 to 4 years, government has transferred the responsibility of compliance of everybody on the 4 to 5% of SSCs who are complied, right? In GST, you have not just to make sure that you are compliant, you have to also run behind your vendors and make sure they are compliant.
So on GST, I'd just like to add, our industry, the solar industry is actually on an inverted duty structure. So you claim input credit, and since you're importing 90% of your components, you're paying IGST. So there's a huge accumulation of GST credit at 18%. When you dispatch a solar system, it's a composite rate of 70% of the value is at 12%, and 30% is treated as services. So that is at 18%, so you have a composite rate. But then your output tax is much lower than the input. So we are sitting on crores of rupees of input. We can also claim refund. That's a good thing, but refund is very complicated, and at least as far as refunds are concerned, the GST department is quite quick. But nevertheless, it has resulted in a huge accumulation of input credit. Now, to the point that Samadrita was saying about your suppliers not being GST compliant, we have to actually look at all our suppliers and check whether they have paid GST on their inputs. We found defaulters, so we've said to them very clearly that till you pay GST, it doesn't reflect in our GST, or we're not going to pay you the GST portion. So we've actually done that. To some extent, it has saved us money, but when we did this initial cleanup, we had to write off lakhs of rupees because we are carrying those amounts in our books. It's not reflecting in your GSTR. And we took a hit in the P&L, and we had a lot of brickbats from our investors as well, saying, what were you guys doing all these years? But that was a cleanup that we had to do. But what this is actually doing is, on one hand, yes, it gives you a lot more, you have to put in a lot more resources and do this reconciliation work. But yes, it definitely saves you some money because you're not paying your suppliers till they fall in line. And normally the suppliers who, where this gets a little more complicated is they say some guys will file returns once a month, some will file once in 3 months, and then some will say, after the year end, I have time till September 30th to file. So till September 30th of the next financial year, you're not sure whether this guy is going to file his GST return or not. So we've had to actually be very cautious and make sure that we hold the money for the GST portion. Basic amount we pay. So yeah, that's also helped a little bit. As far as TDS is concerned, yes, I echo Sharat's problem on because we also have that where TDS gets deducted and then you claim it much later in your tax return.
Irony is that these were introduced to get hold of people who are evading the taxes. But the people who are doing this circus is all the compliant SSC. Like in e-com, you introduce TDS and TCS concept. Everything is online. You know that how much money is being transferred by Amazon and Flipkart to your account, right? Still, you are asking them to deduct TDS and TCS, and then someone is getting into that circle of claiming it back. I don't know what we are actually achieving apart from creating a disguise kind of employment for some tax consultants or accountants apart from that.
Yeah, TCS is definitely a challenge. You'll end up maybe billing lakhs of rupees to your customer, but you'll have 1,500 rupees of TCS which you have to claim, and then he has to pay, then it has to reflect. I mean, it's such a nightmare. And now the government has outsourced a further set of compliance saying, if your vendor has not filed his return, then you have to deduct TDS at a higher percentage. So those are all challenges again. But Srikant, you want to say something?
I'm immune to these. Neither do I get input tax credit and no TDS deducted on me. My customer pays me on the go. So it is on this front, I'm blessed from the tax compliance perspective. But yeah, the input tax credit, which we don't get, is a big hit. Although the general perception is that itself, if you bring this rate from 5% to 18%, the product prices will go up. That's a market perspective. That's how people perceive, but that never happens. Even when the GST was launched, it was a very strict mandate that any benefit you gain out of it, you'll have to transfer to the consumers, end consumers. And that's how it is. Even the rate comes to 5 to 18, no one in the market will increase their prices. We know that what the consumer are liable to pay, and consumer doesn't care about the 18% or 12%. They just care about that, okay, this is coffee I'm buying for 250 or 400, that's it. Whatever tax implication is on you. So in a way, it's not on consumer which it impacts because they still pay the same. If the credit comes in, then it's the company and the entire supply chain gets benefited out of it.
Yeah, more like all of us echo, right? In terms of we spend a lot of time sometimes we take a hit to the P&L. Okay, if I may add, right, even I have gone through this cycle in the recent past. My feeling is, one, we should not, this looks small amounts, right? Some other things which can be automated, like through a bot or whatever it is, right? It will save a lot of time, right? So if I take the clue from the automation, right, if anybody in the panel says, Srikant, if you want to add, or Sarad, what are the things you are automating to improve the cycle, right? And yeah.
See, from our side, the collection cycles are pretty important for us. And earlier when there were just one single mode of payment, now that's not the case. You have UPI, you have card, you have, then you have the aggregators who sell through the market, and each one has their own payment cycles to us. And reconciliation of those is something which is a really pain point. Even at if you have tied up with the marketplaces, larger marketplaces from the Amazon and Flipkarts, and I know that few of the business houses who are working with these giants, the reconciliation is one thing which does takes a lot of pain and which blocks your money, because till the time your collections are not reconciled, they're not going to pay you, and you are stuck with the cash at their pocket and you are still fighting for it. So the reconciliation of these items can be automated, which we, because right now, given the, I'll say, RPAs available in the market, it's pretty straightforward. Earlier, which was very product specifically designed, now it's a plain vanilla product which is in the offering, where the scrolling and everything on the Unify IDs can be done. The bank MRs which comes, you can just upload and the reconciliation comes out. So these are the things which we are currently working at. With the team being set now, because this is one thing which goes away, because if we are in a direct consumer facing and our sales should match my bank collections, if there's any gap in that, then I'm not in a nice position to be. So from our side, this is one of the areas where we are trying to automate things.
I'd like to add here. So from, with regard to certain companies where, they have the high value customers or middle value customers, and where you need to underwrite the customers, it becomes very important to automate the underwriting, underwriters, because of the fact that, say for example, a salesperson goes and fetches one customer, brings one customer back. Now, the underwriting has to be done, okay? Whether, just to check whether the customer has capacity or to take, procure 10 lakhs or 1 crore worth of goods. But if that is done manually, what happens is lot of errors can happen, in the sense that you start using your own ideas into it and think that, okay, fine, this customer is good enough to do business. Suppose the customer has a capacity of only 10 lakhs to procure 10 lakhs. Now you feel the customer wants to buy 1 crore worth of goods. Now you do the financial check, background, diligence and everything, and you find that no, the customer hasn't paid. Your historical data shows that he hasn't paid to earlier parties on a regular basis. All those things gets captured in a system. If those can be captured in a system and you can automate it, then it becomes very easy to choose the customers whom you're going to sell. And that is something very important. Why I'm saying, because where you deal with a lot of high value customers, you really need to know that whether the customer's credibility is good. You should be able to say that, so that you do not sale doesn't turn out to be a bad debt, right? So automation of underwriting is very important, I feel. And second is that the GST. Now, as we are talking about GST, what happens is, now you do a transaction with the party, with a vendor. You are purchasing from the party, and the party has not been paying GST. Okay, and you're you are just continuing paying your GST to the government on output tax. Now, if you do a system automation, if you can automate to know that at the time of second transaction, whether the customer has paid GST on the first transaction, then you can always come, and if there's a trigger, you know that the customer hasn't paid GST in your last 2-3 transactions, but again you're going transacting with that party, with that customer. I'm sorry, I'm using the word customer, it should be supplier. So say for example, you have purchased from the supplier, and in a few earlier invoices, he hasn't paid GST, and when you are again purchasing from the customer, from the supplier, you should have the trigger, right? That supplier hasn't paid GST on your invoices, and you are you are continuously paying GST to the government without getting benefit of the input tax. So you have to have that thing in the system, which is giving a kind of flash to you that should you purchase again from that supplier, or you should not. Or you should tell the supplier, boss, you please pay the GST first, then I'll go, I'll again purchase from you. I'll continue purchasing from you. So these are few things cannot be managed manually. I think these are something which, if can be automated, it adds value to the organization.
I would like to add to this point. Actually, now there are a couple of service providers who are providing you APIs where you can send a vendor invoice, IRN number, and check whether that is valid or not. But it's an expensive solution. See, companies who has SAPs or Oracle advanced ERP system and who have a big budget, they can implement this. And when you are doing your invoice posting, etc., at that time it can hit the API and check whether the invoice is valid or not, and whether the vendor has filed last return or not. Or you can have scripts which can check that, okay, these are the open invoices with the IRN numbers and which all are filed or not. And you can have intelligence that same month not applicable, previous month 10th has crossed, filed or not, and all, and based on that it can flag. But it's going to be pretty expensive implementations and systems.
The good part is that we have inbuilt in our system with our own ERP, our own IT team has developed that application in-house, and that's helping us like anything.
In the interest of the time, right, last 2 minutes, in between I raised, when your working capital system entirely does fail, any one of your tenure, any of the organization, right, have you knocked the door of the bank and how it started?
Fortunately, no.
Yeah. So yes, so what happens is definitely when there's a working capital gap, how do you manage it? So it is basically done through the bankers and lenders and BFCs. The most important point out here is that you have to decide that what would be the source of your fund, whether you'll be taking a working capital loan or whether you should be taking term loan, or supply chain financing, or receivable financing, or you should be taking cash credit from the bank. So these are the things, options which you have if you are approaching the bankers and NBFCs. The most important thing which you have to remember here is that the rates which they're offering has to be competitive, right? Because they do not follow the same rate, same with everyone. So that has to be very competitive. And again, the most important thing, I'll say that I'll basically focus a little bit on supply chain financing. What happens is that, it saves, it helps in your managing your liquidity. Because it's basically an arrangement with the lenders that you pay to my purchaser, you pay to my supplier, okay, now, immediately, and I will pay you back on 30 days or 90 days, whatever the terms of payment with the NBFC be like. So that helps to manage your fund. Your fund doesn't go out immediately because the bankers or lenders are paying to the supplier, and what you are paying to, when you are paying to your lender, that is after maybe 90 days or 120 days or 60 days. That helps a lot. So these are something which you need to take a decision that what would be my prepayment schedule with the lenders, keeping the seasonality of the business in mind, that this is the time when I will get a lot of cash. So that time we should be, that is the time when we should be able to pay, payment to the, term loan payments, what are payment to the lenders. So those are very important planning which need to be done.
Yeah, I think we are done with the time. If any questions, Vatsa?
Any questions, then you can take it up.
Hi, this is Amit Joshi. I work with an auto ancillary company. It's a manufacturing company. We supply to OEMs. So one of the ways of improving your working capital and cash flow is bill discounting, right, with customers or with bankers, right? So many times our customers being OEMs, they are ready to discount our bills, or even the bankers are ready to discount the bills. So the question is, how do you decide how much is, of course, when they discount, they might be a bit expensive compared to your bankers, right? This bill discounting might be maybe 0.5 or 1% expensive, right? So how do you decide how much additional interest that you can pay to discount the bills, which will definitely improve your working capital, your cash flows, and your ROCs also, right? So how do you decide how much is the additional interest that you can pay to discount to improve your working capital, ROCs, etc.? Thank you.
I would say it depends upon your balance sheet position. From my experience, I will give you an example. I started my career in ITC and we used to have billions of dollar cash lying in our balance sheet, right? So it will never make sense for me to put my money in FDs or liquid mutual fund as 6% and discount something at 9 or 10%. But if let's say you don't have that kind of balance sheet and you have to take ODs or working capital facilities, so then what is the cost of capital or cost of getting funds for you? If let's say the cost of next alternate funding is equity and which is coming at 20% or 25% for you, maybe a 12%, 13% discounting rate is not bad. You are still saving 8%. But if you already have cash with you and you are just discounting that bill and putting that money in FDs or liquid mutual fund, there is no point of doing that circus. So in nutshell, basically, what is the cost of your capital and the usage of the proceed you are going to do? Is it going to improve your return or not from that?
I'd also like to add one point here. It also depends on what is your cash cycle, right? And how stretched are you in terms of your receivables and your payables? Because typically, if you're supplying to a bigger organization, there could be delays. There could be some tendency for them to pay whenever, they'll have their own payment runs and stuff. Whereas you'll have to pay your suppliers on, let's say, 35 days, 30, 45 days, whatever. It all depends on your cash cycle. Because ultimately, any amount of discount that you do in your P&L, it'll come after EBITDA. So, and then whether you have an investor or whether you're a promoter-driven company, generally the tendency is, oh, we've done fine on EBITDA. But as a finance person, that's a nightmare for us. Because, personally, if you ask me, I don't believe in EBITDA. It's probably the worst metric anybody should ever see. Because the interest cost is something that keeps eating us, right? So it'll also depend on how tight is your cash cycle. And then you'll have to make a judgment. So I would say it's more case-to-case basis, but depends on how immediately you need the cash. So there may be a situation where you may have to discount and pay a little more interest because you need the cash, because you need to pay, you have to execute a bigger order, where you have to pay a supplier. So it could be dependent on case to case. No fixed answer for that. But it will depend on company to company and the size, of course.
Just one point to add here. One on receivable discounting specifically. In the market, if you go today, it's not only about financing your cash flow needs, but also how you want to present your balance sheet as well. So there are quite a lot of options with recourse and without recourse. So it's not only purely about your cash flow management in the market. There are quite a lot of players who are in this segment who are ready to take without recourse propose you without recourse discounting. So in that case, you are cleaning up your debtors and you are building up your strong balance sheet. So it's not only on the percentage basis points which you pay extra, but also what exactly is your purpose of doing that, which as he mentioned. So you have to take into account for both. That's what we do.
Hi, I'm Praneeth. Apart from the traditional rules of working capital ratios or these many months of runway should be there for a healthy organization, right? Are there any parameters or fundamentals, you all personally prefer to understand the progress of a healthy organization in terms of cash flows, etc.?
Coming to working capital, my philosophy is that if you can operate on a zero working capital or a negative working capital cycle, it's a symbol of a good business model and a good organization.
I'll not agree with that, because if you are not in a positive working capital, then you're not expanding your business to that extent. So the working capital requirement is negative is okay that you are in a safe place. But if you want to be in a safe place, we wouldn't be running our businesses as such. So working capital is good, but should be in a position where you can manage things. So that's my perspective. But yeah,
I would just give one example here. In 𝗥𝗲𝗃, we were importing raw materials and other stuffs, giving 90 days or 120 days of LCs to the vendors. They were discounting LC, getting their bills. I was getting 90 days to 120 days of credit. 30 days was my production and sales cycle. And since I was a D2C, my sale was on a immediate payment basis. Even if I'm selling on Amazon or Flipkart, I was getting money in 15 days. So I was receiving money first and then making my payment without compromising on my growth. Just one example. So it's not necessary that if you don't have money stuck in working capital, you're not growing. It just depends upon your business model and a lot of other stuffs.
Yeah, correct. So it depends upon the business model and the business process. So healthy working capital would be like, if you are can manage with your own fund without taking any borrowings from outside, that's how you can say that, you're having a wealthy and healthy working capital management system in the organization because you can manage with your own fund. Now, what would be your working capital ratios or what? That will depend upon the business model. If it is a capital-intensive company, or if it is a company where inventory can be liquidated very fast, so your DSO and DPO days are something which need to be monitored, and your CCC cycle should be cash conversion cycle should be the minimum. That is how you can manage your working capital. And only thing, if you're not dependent upon external borrowing, that's a fantastic way to do.
I think the important thing is also every month, once you've closed your books of accounts, look at your monthly cash flow. Look where your money went and where it came from. That should give you an idea. If you analyze a 5 to 6 month trend, that will tell you where is it that you're spending your money and where is it you can actually optimize. So are you collecting your receivables on time, or is there a delay there, and because of that there's pressure on paying suppliers, and then you may have to end up doing bill discounting and stuff like that. I think to me that's a good starting point. And if you are cash flow if you're positive on cash flow from operations, you're starting on the right note, right? And then of course you look at how you're getting your funding from either the banks or whatever. That's the next step. But I think to me that's the most important thing. That's what I look at. That's what I keep pushing people in the organization as well, saying that if you don't, if we don't collect on time, we are going to get into trouble, right? Because the domino effect of that is I cannot import. And of course, like what Samadhita said, it depends on the industry. If you take our own industry, I don't want to keep boring you on the solar, but for example, the solar cell prices fluctuate a lot. So there could be days when we don't want to buy the cells because the cell prices are high. There could be a sudden crash, and then it makes sense for us to probably stock up on inventory, because then what it does, it helps me to get better on cost of manufacturing, right? So it depends on the industry, but I think your cash flow from operations is probably the best place for you to start on.